And so she's getting more and more and more freaked out by this. And then all of a sudden, she stops. And her jaw basically hits the floor. And she is staring in absolute disbelief. Because in front of her, though it is impossible, she is staring at Bigfoot's bathroom.
So, once again, you found yourself at the campsite of the Orator. But please pull up a chair. As you can see, my fire is stoked, which means tonight I have another tale to tell. But before we begin, if you do find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, that allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, all of my stories are true, first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. I collect them from outside sources and then retell them here on the channel. So if you or somebody you know has a story that you think might fit well on my channel, you can reach out in the comments below, but the preference is that you reach out to me on one of my social media. That way we can connect, I can hear your story, and then hopefully one day feature it here on The Orator. And third, we do have a contest going on through the months of June and now extended throughout July, and I'm giving away 7 custom Orator trading cards. They're made by a company called Jack's Attic. Jack's Attic does horror pop weirdness. They do all sorts of cool stuff, and they're always pumping out new, fresh merchandise that they create and craft completely by hand. And one of their specialties is horror trading cards. And so they made me these custom Orator trading cards. They're really, really cool. Each one is uniquely burned by the Orator's campfire. There were originally 20. There are only 7 left. How do you win one? Comment on any video in the month of June or July, and your name will get put in a hat, and I'm going to draw 7 names at the end of July, and those 7 people are going to win a custom trading card, as well as a letter by me, and a picture, scary picture, by my daughter. She's 7 years old, and she's super excited about it, so you're going to get one of those as well. How do you increase your chances? You comment on multiple videos. You can't comment more than once on one video and get multiple entries, but you can comment on multiple videos and get multiple entries. Just make sure those videos were produced and sent out in the months of June and July, and up your chances. I am excited to have those winners, and we are almost at 600 subscribers, which is exciting because the next contest I'm going to do is at 1,000. And so let's get to that 1,000 right away so we can do another giveaway. I'm stoked for that. And so now with all of that out of the way, let's finally get on to today's story. It is a tale that I call Church Bells. The year is 2006, and we are in central Virginia in the United States, and we're in a very rural part of Virginia. Now, in this area, along with a lot of others in the United States, there is a ton of forest in this area, and it's not like a little bit of woods like you might see in certain small cities. This is like ancient forest that goes on for miles in all directions. You can walk all day in this forest and never hit civilization. You'll never find a road or a building or anything like that. And so that's kind of where we're at. And we have Madison, who's 10 years old, and her best friend Kylie, who is also 10 years old. And these two grew up together, and they do everything together. They watch shows together, they go to school together, they hang out. Basically 24/7, these two are inseparable. And one of their favorite things to do is to go out in the woods behind their houses and just sort of explore, see what's out there, come across weird stuff, enjoy being out in the woods. And in a particular day during the summer, they're not in school or anything like that. They're out in the woods exploring, as they are wont to do, and they happen to run across this perfect creek, or sometimes people call them a crick. And basically what this is a small stream of water. It's smaller than a river, but a lot of times they're big enough to where you can get in and kind of play around in them, and that's exactly what these two girls did. Madison and Kylie got in, they kind of swam around a little bit. It wasn't deep enough to really swim, but it was deep enough that they could, like, if they laid down, they could completely submerge their bodies. And so they were just kind of having fun and playing and stuff like that. And what was even better was on the banks of this creek was this thick, green, soft moss. And so after they were done playing in the river and they were basically exhausted, they just sort of laid back on the moss and were laughing and playing and having fun and just enjoying life. And they did that for a few hours, and then at some point, they realized that it was getting kind of dark. It was probably dinner time, and so they needed to go home. And what was nice about this creek was it was kind of on this trail. Now, they were further out in the woods than they had probably ever been before, but they had followed this trail to get there, and so they're like, if we just backtrack on this trail, we're probably going to find home. And sure enough, they backtracked, they found their way home, and right before they went into their respective houses, they made a plan for the next day to meet up and go out to that creek, have lunch there, and just enjoy the creek and have fun swimming. And so the next day, around 1 o'clock, they meet up together, and they've both packed a bunch of stuff in these little lunch boxes that they have, and they head out. And for the first little while, it's all of the stuff that they're used to. They explore these woods so much that it's like nothing is a surprise to them. They know all the little trails and where they lead. This is their backyard, basically. But at some point, they kind of reach the outer limits of where they're used to, and they find the trail, and they start heading back on that trail to the creek. And they're walking for a little while, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then finally, the trail opens up to the creek, and they're there, except there's no creek here. All of a sudden, this area, which they're positive used to be the creek, is now these really old giant ferns. And they're just sort of everywhere, but it is this big clearing, this big opening, and everything else looks kind of like where they were before, and they've been there for a couple hours the day before, so they feel like they knew the area, and they were a little bit weirded out by this, but they're like, we know how old and giant this forest is, and it could have been so easy to accidentally take a wrong turn or something like that, but they both decide that if they just keep walking, at some point, they will run across this creek, because it was pretty big, and it's running through the woods, and they're walking generally in the right direction, and so at some point, they'll probably walk across it. But it is getting, like 1:30, 2 o'clock, and they are starting to get hungry. So they decide, what? Even though we haven't made it to the creek yet, let's sit down, let's take a rest, we'll eat, and then we'll make our way to the creek after we're done. So they sit down and they eat, and they're, finish their meal and everything. They start packing up, and then they decide to just sort of play there and have a little bit of fun. And so they have watermelon, and they're spitting watermelon seeds at each other, and they're playing tag, they're playing hide and go seek, and they probably spend like a half hour, 45 minutes just playing in that big fern open area. And then they pack up, and they're like, all right, that was fun, but let's find this creek. That's really what we came out here to do today. And so they head out, and right away, they notice that this forest feels sort of different. It's just sort of darker, it's quieter, there are fewer animals, and it just sort of is giving off this creepy vibe that it just wasn't giving off before. And Madison's noting that Kylie is kind of whipping her head around and looking as if she's hearing stuff. And both girls, they're not saying it, but they both know that they're both kind of creeped out by the forest, and something just doesn't feel right. But they've been in this forest a million times, and so they just kind of keep walking, and they're thinking to themselves, if we just come across the creek, then all of this is going to go away, and we're going to be fine, and we're going to be very happy that we found it. But after about a half an hour of walking, they still had not discovered the creek, and they're starting to get really freaked out by this point because they're further than they've ever been out in the woods. They're not really following a trail anymore, and they feel like if we were going to come across this creek, we surely would have done it by now. And so they're kind of thinking, all right, maybe it's time to just turn around and head back or something like this, when all of a sudden, in the middle of the woods, they see a bathroom. It's a toilet and a sink and a tub, and they're all positioned as though they would be positioned in a bathroom. And they're upright and they're relatively clean, and it's just out here in the middle of nowhere in the woods. There's nothing else around. There's no houses, there's no other trash, nothing. It's just like a bathroom in the middle of the woods. And so they all of a sudden go from being creeped out and weirded out and everything like that to thinking this is hilarious and weird. And they're making all sorts of jokes and stories and stuff like that. And before they end up leaving this area, they nickname it Bigfoot's bathroom. They decided, you know what? It's out here. It's all set up. It must be for Bigfoot. He must come and use it. And they're just obviously sort of joking around. But the good news is this has sort of lightened their hearts and their moods, and they're ready to continue on and keep looking for the creek. And so they kind of head back in the same direction that they were heading, and they keep walking in that direction for another 15 or 20 minutes before they sort of decide, you know what? We are too far away from the house. We're not even on any trails anymore. We don't really know where we're at. We really need to find our way home. And so they sort of, kind of make this wide loop, and they kind of are hoping Still, maybe they'll run across the creek. But at this point, they decide to kind of turn back and make their way back home. And so they're kind of more or less heading south-ish to where they would hopefully meet up with the trail and then be able to go back home. And they start walking. And they're walking for literally almost like an hour without seeing anything that's familiar to them or that they've walked across before or anything like that. And so at this point, they're starting to get scared and angry at one another, and they're starting to freak out. And it's not either one of their faults, but they're young, and they're very nervous, and they're sort of blaming it on each other. I said we should go this way, and we went this way. So they're getting very, very frustrated with each other. And all of a sudden, they start fighting. A big fight breaks out, and Kylie's like, I don't care. We just need to keep going the direction that we're going, and we're going to make it home. And Madison says, yeah, but we don't know exactly what direction we came in, and we've been walking kind of all over the place. She said, why don't we just follow the sun? It sets in the west, so we know we're headed west. And at some point, if we keep heading west, we're going to run into something, a house, a road, I don't know, but we'll run into something, and we know this area really well, and once we run into something, then we can get back home. And so this huge fight breaks out, and neither one of them will relent. And so finally, Madison says, fine, just go your way, and I'll go mine, and we'll see who makes it home first. And Kylie right away says, fine. And so she turns, and she runs off basically southish, and then Madison turns west, and she starts heading towards the setting sun. And at this point, it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 4 o'clock in the evening. It's starting to get a little bit later, but Madison feels pretty confident in her strategy. And so she starts walking, and not 10 minutes later, she hears footsteps coming behind her. And she thinks, awesome. Kylie obviously realized that my idea made more sense, and she's coming back. So she turns, she says, hey, Kylie, but there's no one there. And so she starts yelling out for her friend, and she's listening, and she doesn't hear anything, but she also doesn't hear any footsteps. So she thinks, all right, maybe I'm just getting freaked out, and there weren't really footsteps. But just to be cautious, she looks around, and she finds a pretty big solid stick. She picks it up, she makes sure it's something she can swing, and then she just continues walking west, and that's her plan. I'm going to walk west, and at some point, I'm going to hit something. And as she's walking, she starts hearing footsteps walking behind her. And every single time, she stops, and she looks around, and she doesn't see anything. And it's still light out, so she's not, like, really scared. And she's been in these woods a million times. So it's not like she's getting nervous, but she's not panicked or anything yet. But as she's walking, and more time is passing, and she's not seeing anything, it really is starting to wear on her. And more importantly, these footsteps behind her, it's like they're matching pace with her. If she speeds up, they speed up. If she slows down, they slow down. If she stops, it stops. And so she's getting more and more freaked out by this. And then all of a sudden, she stops. And her jaw basically hits the floor. And she is staring in absolute disbelief. Because in front of her, though it is impossible, she is staring at Bigfoot's bathroom. She's like, I don't know how. I know we were headed more or less north. We stopped. We kind of circled a little bit back. And then I've been heading west for like, I don't know, a couple hours now. And I've run across this bathroom. It's just like, there's just no way. I would have had to walk in this big circle. But I know I'm going west because I'm following the sun. And so she's not only freaked out, but now she's kind of angry because Kylie, her friend, is gone, and she's out in the woods, and she's back at this place, and she still doesn't even know where this is in relation to anything else. And so she just freaks out, and she starts screaming, she takes her stick, and she starts smashing it against the ground, and she gets really, really mad. And then all of a sudden, her anger dissipates. She's like, all right, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of here? And she's sitting, and she's thinking, and then all of a sudden, from behind, she starts hearing those footsteps again. And they're way, way, way off in the distance, but she can definitely hear someone walking through the woods. And so she gets up and she's looking, and she starts yelling her friend's name for Kylie, and she doesn't hear anything and she doesn't see anything. But these footsteps, she's hearing them getting closer, but not only are they getting closer, the speed is increasing. It's like this person went from walking to jogging and to running, and now it's just sprinting at her. And she hears this thing running through the forest, and she's looking in the direction, and it's evening, but it's still light enough out to where she should be able to see this thing, and she doesn't see anything. So she all of a sudden gets up and just starts running. She just whatever this thing is behind her, she wants nothing to do with it. She starts running in the opposite direction, and she doesn't even know what direction she's running in anymore. She's just running, panicked. And then as she's running, and she hears these footsteps gaining on her, she all of a sudden hears church bells. And in her head, she's like totally relieved, because if there's a church, then all she has to do is run to that church, and once she finds it, then she can at least figure out where she's at in relation to everything else. And so she turns and she starts running as hard as she can towards what she thinks are the church bells. And this person behind her is gaining on her, and clearly this person is much faster than her. And so she's running as fast as she can, and she's hearing these church bells, and they're getting louder and louder, and so she thinks, I'm getting close. And then all of a sudden, she runs out into this giant clearing in the woods, and it's this, the woods are overhead, and it opens up to where she can see the sky. And she looks up in the sky, and it's like maybe 6 o'clock at night, so it's evening. It's getting later, but in the sky is this massive black circular cloud. It looks like nothing she's ever seen before. She said the outside was gray, like a dark black cloud, but as it got closer to the inside of this thing, which was like a big circle, it was this total black hole. You couldn't see anything inside of it. It was blacker than night or any sky she had seen, and she said she felt this total sense of dread and nausea. She said it felt like if you looked through binoculars long enough, you almost get disoriented because it's like zoomed in, and she said she started to feel that, like, the sickness, and she was going to throw up. And then all of a sudden, as she's watching this giant circular cloud rotating in the sky, she hears the church bells again, but they are coming from this giant cloud, and they are booming out. It's not like they're quiet. It's this giant, chaotic, massive chiming bell, and it's just booming through the forest, and she's sitting there in total awe watching this, and all of a sudden she hears these footsteps running at her, getting closer, and she looks, and she takes one look at this cloud thing, and she knows, if I run towards the cloud and these bells, I'm going to die. I know it. I know this is certain death in front of me, and I know whatever this thing is that I can't see but can hear behind me, if it catches me, I'm dead too. And so she turns right away from both the clouds and the thing chasing her, and she just runs. And she, it's getting dark, and she runs out of the clearing, so now it's forested overhead, and any sun is obscured by the branches over the trees, and she's just running. And branches are whipping her face, and she knows she's getting cut, and she's bleeding, she's got scrapes all over, and she falls down, and she's all muddy and dirty and gross, but she doesn't care. She just gets up, and she keeps running, and running, and running, away from the clouds, away from the thing chasing her, when all of a sudden, BAM! She smacks into something, she flips over, she's all on the ground, she's in pain, it hit her right in her lower midsection, and she's just laying there, trying to breathe, the wind's been knocked out of her, when all of a sudden, she realizes she can't hear the church bells anymore. Nothing's chasing her anymore. The clouds that were up in the sky, the big scary clouds, she looks up, and through the clouds she can see, and everything looks normal. And for the first time in hours, she takes her first relieved breath. She rolls over, she stands up, she's figured out what she tripped over, and it's a fence. And she's like, thank God, a man-made, somebody built this fence. It's not just forest. She grabs it, and she slowly follows it out, and it eventually leads her to a farmhouse. And she exits the woods, and she goes up to the farmhouse, she knocks on the door, and sure enough, there's a guy that lives there. He comes out. She tells him, listen, I've been lost in the woods for hours. I didn't know where I was. And he's like, don't worry about it, honey. I'll get you home. So they get in his truck, and he drives her all the way back home. She tells him exactly where she lives. He drops her off. She goes inside, and she's just crying. And here's the crazy part. Nobody even knew anything was wrong. Kylie had gone back home. Basically, right after they split up, Kylie found the trail and got back home. She had no clue that Madison was still lost. She just assumed her friend, who was just as good as she was in the woods, had also found her way home. And so she didn't want to get them in trouble by saying how far they had gone or that they had gotten lost or anything like that. And so she just went home and was quiet, and that was it. And by the time Madison got home, it's hours and hours later, and her parents were like, they just didn't know. They just thought that her and Kylie were out having fun in the woods. And so they're, of course, so apologetic and freaked out, and they're asking her what happened. And, Madison said she just didn't feel Like she could tell them the whole story. She said that she was out there, that she got lost, that it got dark, that she got scared. But she didn't tell her parents or anybody else except for Kylie about the thing chasing her or the ominous clouds in the sky or the giant church bells ringing from the center. And she said after that, we still went out in the woods, but we never went past the trails. We never went to areas that we didn't know, and we never visited Bigfoot's bathroom again. And so that's going to do it for today's story. If you find yourself enjoying this story or any of my other content, first-hand accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, that allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, of course, all of my stories are first-hand true accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. So if you or somebody you know has a story and you think it might fit well on my channel, you are able to reach out in the comments below, but I prefer you reach out to me on one of my social media, and we'll find a time to get together, collect your story, and feature it one day here on The Orator. And of course, lastly, through the months of June and July, I have my contest going on. You can win a free custom order trading card shipped directly to you. You don't pay shipping or handling or anything like that. It is completely free. You get an order trading card. You get a letter from me with a short story on it and a signature, and you're going to get a picture for my 7-year-old daughter because she wants to draw a scary story or a scary picture, and she wants to put it in there for you guys. And so make sure to comment on this video and all my other videos in the months of June and July to get in on the action for that. And until next time, where you'll pull up your chair, my fire will be stoked, and I'll have another tale to tell.